Hi there, I'm Jay Danley, and today I'm going to talk to you about stylistic changes in film scoring found in American film noir from 1943 to 1955, essentially covering the first wave of American film noir, also called the classic era of film noir. Now, in 1943, the American public's tastes were changing. The effects of World War II had created a desire for escapism in film which had worked as a bomb for a while. But a need for realism began to seep in, almost as if there had been a sober awakening in people who had begun to come to grips with a darker reality. Now, the changes in American filmmaking could be because of this, or it could just be that there was a natural reaction to the fanciful, romantic, escapist fun of Hollywood films prior. People's tastes do change, but there is some speculation that I've read that says that actually the news footage coming back from overseas about World War II, black and white, grainy imagery, very realistic, was having an effect on the public's taste as well. Whatever the causes of its newfound popularity, American film noir embraced modernism and realism. Many of the films came from crime and thriller literature of the 1920s and 30s, as well as the pulp fiction magazines of the same time. French critic and filmmaker Eric Romer said that the best of classic-era film noir drew inspiration from American crime novels, whose appeal was in the delirious romanticism of their heroes and the modernism of their technique. As popular fiction changed, so did the films they inspired. The books contain several modern elements that would be found in film noir. For example, an unorthodox handling of time, that is, flashbacks, broken timelines, subjectivity, particularly in the use of first-person narrations or voiceovers, and subjective camera placement.
You see, the body of a young man was found floating in the pool of her mansion, with 2 shots in his back and 1 in his stomach. Nobody important, really. Just a movie writer with a couple of B pictures to his credit. The poor dope. He always wanted a pool. Well, in the end, he got himself a pool. Only the price turned out to be a little high.
Multiple points of view, and most particularly, sex and fear of women.
How do you do, Mr. Dietrichson? I'm Walter Nett, Pacific All Risk.
Pacific All what?
The Pacific All Risk Insurance Company. It's about some renewals on the automobiles. I've been trying to contact your husband for the past 2 weeks, but he's never in his office.
Is there anything I can do?
The insurance ran out on the 15th. I'd hate to think of your having a smashed fender or something while you're not fully covered.
Perhaps I know what you mean, Mr. Neff. I've just been taking a sunbath.
No pigeons around, I hope.
This last point is often seen as one of the strongest examples of modernism in these books and films, as gender roles had changed greatly during World War II. As noir reached an early peak in popularity in the mid-1940s, it made the traditional, formulaic crime film seem more artful. Narratives and camera angles were organized along subjective lines, characters were depicted in shades of gray, urban women became eroticized and dangerous, endings were less unproblematically happy, and violence looked more pathological. Could be said possibly that this is an example of the rise of the anti-hero, where the good guy is not completely good and the bad girl is not completely bad, right? Scores for these films not only undermined the security of more conventional film scores through the incorporation of dissonance and atonality, but also through such destabilizing devices as the breakdown of traditional diegetic, non-diegetic distinctions, and the use of unusual instrumentation and experimental recording techniques. Christopher Palmer, author of The Composer in Hollywood, said, "The general idiom of Hollywood composers, basically 19th century oriented, was not attuned to the mood and feeling of this kind of film." Dissonance and atonality had been used before, but film noir used these elements a great deal more as scoring for these films moved gradually away from the traditional European romantic model to a style that incorporated modern ideas, most notably serialism. See Schoenberg and Beyburn. It has been said that these classic noir films had a more American sound in the scores, but dissonance, atonality, and serialism are not specifically American inventions by any means. However, another term often used to describe these scores is urban, and this seems quite appropriate. The stories were more often than not situated in cities and featured city-based characters. The composers of these early noir scores were, for the most part, American-born. These composers did not come out of the European symphonic tradition of Max Steiner and Erich Wolfgang Korngold, but were born in America and educated in 20th century compositional techniques. Mark Vernet, in his excellent essay, Film Noir on the Edge of Doom, states that the style of noir came from 4 changes in film: a transition towards a more serious tone, a shrinking of the frame, a change in the physical appearance of the actors and decor, and the weakening of censorship. The shrinking of the frame, referring to the use of close-ups and subjective camera placement and a lack of larger panoramic shots, is complemented by a decrease in the amount of music used in the films and the move towards smaller ensembles and selective instrumentation rather than a full symphonic orchestra. A transition to a more serious tone is represented musically by a move away from the 19th century romantic style of scoring and an embrace of modern music devices such as serial and 12-tone music, again, Webern, Schoenberg. Uses of dissonance, atonality, and even more sophisticated syncopation. The change of style, or the changes in the looks of the actors and decor, is represented musically not only by the use of modern composing devices, but the inclusion of other popular music idioms, primarily jazz. Now, a lot of people, when they think about the sound of film noir scores, immediately think of jazz. The truth is, jazz became more of a common thing in films noir later on. It was in the very beginning, the first wave of American film noir used composers that had been schooled in the traditional ways of scoring films, and they knew about it, but they were coming from there, but using the more modern approaches for these more modern films. There was some freedom that was going on basically for the composers. They no longer had to use the older styles, but the use of jazz comes in more dominantly in film noir later on. The new realism of these films demanded that popular music be used at least diegetically. For example, the protagonist enters a bar and a jazz group is playing, but noir would go further. Popular music would not only be used as a sonic backdrop, befitting a scene, but by fully incorporating it directly into the main themes of the score. The weakening of censorship is pretty much what it sounds like, simply means that as the films were able to tackle more adult themes, particularly dark, heavy situations, the music was allowed or possibly forced to support this. Now, I'd like to say at this point that a lot of what I've just been reading to you has come from different sources, and I'm going to cite the sources right here. If you're interested in reading about scoring for film noir, try these books. James Nairmore. The book is called Film Noir, A Very Short Introduction. It's excellent, very well done. Second one is an article written by Richard R. Ness, and it's called A Lot of Night Music, The Sound of Film Noir, and it can be found in a publication called Cinema Journal, volume number 47, number 2. And that's it. So I hope you check those out, and if you like this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and I'm going to do another 2 parts on film noir coming up. And I hope that we can possibly engage in some sort of really great conversation about music. I just love it. I'm Jay Danley. Thanks a lot for watching.